talent really look like? And how often do we get it wrong? In this episode of Developing Talent, we're resetting assumptions about talent identification and development. Before we dive into the theory, we cross to the Meridian Bikebug team as they enter their third month of racing in Europe, where depth, pressure, and daily demands are testing every assumption about potential in real time. From there, we sit down with Dr. Alex Roberts, Head of Talent at the Queensland Academy of Sport, to unpack why talent is rarely obvious, easily measured, or guaranteed. Alex explains why early success can be misleading, why talent looks different across sports, and why understanding what you're actually looking for, whether that's physical qualities, mindset, or learning ability, is critical to making the right decisions. She takes us inside the realities of talent ID, showing how coaches, scientists, and decision makers often view potential through very different lenses, and why aligning those perspectives matters if we're serious about long-term development. We'll also catch up with Aidan in Meet the Team, taking a closer look at the teammates keeping our noggins safe as we race across Europe. And finally, we rewind to the Pro Velo Super League, breaking down key moments from the Lockhart Energy Women's Warrnambool Cycling Classic, with Alyssa and Mia reflecting on what the race revealed then and now. This is Developing Talent, and this is Episode 3, Talent ID and Development, Resetting Assumptions about Talent.
Back with Mia after quite a long break.
Hello.
Between interviews. I wanted to know, how was the racing in Morbihan? We had those 2 1.1s.
Yep. So that was now 3 weeks ago. Oh yeah, 2.5 weeks ago. So important. Yeah. So the first day, I'm pretty sure was they had similar names. The first day went pretty well for us. It was quite a chill race overall, like there wasn't too many attacks going or anything. I think there was a headwind most of the way, so none of the teams really wanted to do much. We were kind of just sitting in the bunch for a while. When we got to the local laps, there was a few attacks that were going, and it was really cool to be able to, chase some down, get in a few mini breakaways. Didn't really do anything, but yeah, that was fun. And then Amelie up for a top 10 in the end, which was also really cool. Our first top 10 in a 1.1, so that was really good from her. And then the next day was a bit less positive, but still Amelie and Kirsty rode really well to get through that tough day, just up and down all day. It was raining, so the first day, beautiful weather. Next day, raining.
So on day 2, you had a little tumble up the climb, just with the bunch reducing in speed. Yeah. How was it in the convoy and attempting to make that chase back on after being minutes down?
Yeah, when I got back on my bike, you couldn't even see the convoy on the road at all, and that was at the bottom of the 1.5k climb. So I probably spent a bit too much time on the ground, and then spent the next 30 minutes getting back to the convoy and then in the convoy, and then I was just too done by that time. But yeah, it was still a good day, and I found Quinn in the convoy and she helped me chase on for a bit, so that was also good.
Okay, so both of you have raced Gracia and Feminine, and by the sounds of it, a huge difference for you personally, Hannah, was the impact fueling had on these tours. How do you find the difference between Gracia and Feminine, and what do you do to progress in Feminine more so?
Yeah, so my fueling for Gracia outside the racing was really good. I'd done all the carb loading, and between races I was eating enough food to sustain me. But the food inside the races, I was just really falling short on the gels. I think I was having 50 to 60 grams of carbs per hour for the 5 stages. And by the last 2 days, everyone just could see everyone looking at me, and I could look in the mirror and I knew why they were looking at me, because I had the deepest eye bags. And on the last day, I got to breakfast and I was sitting there trying to eat my cereal, and my hand was shaking as I was trying to eat my cereal. I was like, oh, okay. Probably something's falling short here. I was also getting sick at that point, but I wasn't. Fueling was definitely a factor that played into that. So when I went through to feminine 2 weeks later, I just started off fueling really well, and I made sure to prioritise fueling within races. No matter how sketchy it got, I was still going to eat all my gels. I think I had at least 70 grams of carbs to 80 grams of carbs per hour each race, and that definitely made a big difference. So I made it to the end of the tour feeling so much better.
It does make a huge difference, and it's crazy how the research is leveling up in terms of fueling lately. Now we're with Kirsty, and coming up this weekend we've got Tour of Bretagne, which is a 3-day 2.1 tour, and one of those stages is a 24-kilometre TT. How are you feeling about that?
I'm really excited. It's absolutely perfect for me.
And then there's a few climbs in this one, so how are you feeling about that?
Pretty good, yeah. The climbs usually are hard to set up a rhythm with, but I'm excited.
Firstly, thank you, Alex, for joining us today. We were just joking before because we've obviously known each other for quite a while, and I was asking you what your title was because I feel like every time we chat, it changes slightly. Today, you're here as the head of talent from the QAS. Who better to talk to about talent and talent ID and developing talent than the woman herself who works in this space? Thanks for coming along.
Thanks for having me. Excited to have a bit of a chat.
And a big happy birthday to you too. I believe I've not only asked you to do this, I've asked you to do this on your special day. So
Just goes to our long-standing friendship there, doesn't it, KB?
exactly. Our main audience is primarily cyclists and the cycling community, given that this is a cycling team's YouTube series. But I thought it would be a really good place to start. Our catch cry at Meridian Bikebug is developing talent. It's what we live and breathe by in terms of the direction of our team and what we're trying to work towards. But when we think about talent, I guess there's a lot of misconceptions out there. What are we looking for? Where do we start looking? How do we follow that process? In your experience, in your roles and various roles across your time, where are those misconceptions? Like, are we looking at the right thing? Are we having the right conversations when it comes to talent?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting place to start because one of the big problems in sort of our space at the moment, it's not even so much, are we even looking for the right things, but a lot of us can't even agree on what talent is. So it's not just how are we looking for it, but what are we even looking for? What is the purpose of what we're trying to do when we're talking about talented athletes, about identifying athletes? So probably one of, I guess, to answer your question there, one of the biggest misconceptions is that talent is something that's measurable. Talent is something that essentially people can see if they're trained properly or they run through the right tests and things like that. But yeah, talent is probably more of this, I guess, ephemeral quality in people, and it can manifest in a whole bunch of different ways. And so when we're talking about, again, like identifying and developing talent, the first thing we need to decide is just what are we actually trying to identify and develop. So in my role, it's all around identifying and developing future athletes, future elite athletes across a range of sports. So how we do talent ID for, the 17 sports that we work with is going to look very different to how you do talent ID for a cycling team, for a football team, something like that. So yeah, it really comes back to sort of, what are we actually looking for? And more to the point, what is the outcome that we're actually after?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you mentioned how there are those differences. Maybe just give us some examples. What are some of the things, and I guess who makes those decisions in that quest for finding talent?
Yeah. I mean, again, there's lots of different people that can be involved in those decisions, and all of those people are going to bring kind of their own lens and perspective to it. So if we have a coach who is the one who is identifying the talented athletes, they're selecting them into different squads and teams, that coach is going to look at things probably through a bit of a performance lens, a skill lens, things like that. Whereas if we have a team of, say, sports scientists that are doing the talent identification, doing sort of those initial, testing stages and things like that, they're going to lean a lot more heavily towards, our more physical data, our physiological things. And again, it's really dependent on the sport. So if we look at, I'll use, track cycling as an example. Within track cycling, we want to have those physical underpinning qualities that we know are important to performance. We want to have the lower body power. We want to have the core strength. We definitely want to have those elements of, endurance and things like that to, do the performance that we need to do. But if we're trying to identify future elite athletes, what's more important? Is it their ability to currently ride a bike, or is it their ability to produce massive amounts of force through their lower body? Are we looking at, rate of force production and things like that? Yeah. Or do we care more about somebody who, again, can produce those factors, but has never ridden a bike? And we might need to teach them how to balance on a bike, again, track cycling, how to ride in a velodrome, how to ride in a pack in a group setting in a road race. So depending on who it is that's actually picking the athletes, they're going to pick on those different skills. A coach might tend to be leaning a bit more towards some of those skills, again, that might already exist. They're going to look for athletes that maybe already know how to ride in a pack or how to ride on a velodrome. They're not so much looking for those that have the really, really strong legs, because we can build that. Again, whereas perhaps sports scientists or people coming from a different lens are going to look more at the physical side first, because if we get them with the right coach, we can then teach them some of those other skills. So in my mind, it also really comes back to, like I said, what we're looking for, what is the outcome that we're after, but also who is the group that we're working with. Are we trying to identify talented athletes out of a group of, let's say, 15 or 16-year-olds that have been doing the sport for a little while, and we're really trying to make a selection of who's going to be the best from that group to move on to a new squad or a new team or a new opportunity? Or are we looking for people, maybe from outside the sport entirely, or that are, crossing disciplines or something like that, and coming from track to road or something like that? And in that case, again, what are we actually looking for? What are those important underpinning things that we can then make the most of, we can develop, we can lift towards high performance in the future, rather than who's already got those things? Because if they've already got those skills, it's really not that hard to identify them, right? Anybody can identify the fastest athlete in a group, or, we get the kids out on a field. It's not that hard to pick who the best couple are, but picking who the future ones are, that's the hard piece.
Yeah, I don't envy your role. I was just thinking about how complex that all sounds. But yeah, I guess in terms of having those conversations, and I guess if we're talking finding those athletes, because, it's at the start of their athletic journey, maybe they don't even know what sport they want to do, but they know, as you said, that they've got certain physical qualities that would lend themselves to a preferred discipline or sport. How do you educate not only the athletes in that space, but also the parents? How do you protect the athlete at the early part of their career to ensure that they find their way safely and they don't necessarily end up in the wrong space?
Yeah, so probably the number one thing that we do, and we really encourage all of the coaches that we work with, is that element of athlete choice is probably the first piece. We want athletes in sports that they're enjoying, and we all know that we tend to enjoy things that we're better at. So let's try and find sports that kids are going to be good at naturally. And again, within our setting, we're maybe looking for kids that have never even heard of that sport before. We've got a really nice example coming out of our program at the moment of a track cyclist who came from sprinting, like athletics, was a fairly competitive sprinter within Queensland, was doing, okay on a national stage, but yeah, really good, really athletic, obviously very fast twitchy, but yeah, it just wasn't quite the right fit. We brought them in, put them on a track bike, and 18 months later, 2 years later, they're winning national championships. They're making national squads to head overseas and things like that, because again, they had those underpinning qualities. They just weren't quite the right fit for, in this case, athletics, and they were able to find a much better fit for themselves in track cycling. And we didn't have to force anything. It wasn't hey, athlete, we think you'd be so much better over here. It was, come give it a try, see what you think. And if you like it, let's keep going and see what happens. And because they were naturally good at it, took off and off we go. So in terms of protecting the athlete, that's probably the first thing we do, is make sure that it really is their choice. If you're really enjoying whatever sport you're doing and you absolutely love it and that's what you want to pursue, great. Go for it. We don't want to, take you away from that and put you in something else. So yeah, that's probably that first piece. And then talking to the parents about that too. If your child is really enjoying a sport, great, keep them in there. The point of sport really shouldn't be that elite level performance. Like, great, aspire to it, aim for it. People are going to get there. But it's what, 1% of our population, less, that manage to make it to the elite level in sport. So if that's the only reason we're doing sport, then again, we're kind of missing the point.
Yeah, what are we doing it for, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure these kids really enjoy it. And the other piece that we really spend a lot of time on with parents is around this idea of sport sampling. We really don't encourage athletes to drill down into one sport until they absolutely have to. We really encourage athletes to play multiple sports. We want them swimming and playing a team sport and doing athletics and cross country and, riding a bike and, getting out and trying all of these different things until, yes, there does come a point. There's only so many hours in a day and things like that. If you want to be elite, you are going to have to narrow down eventually. But how late can we leave that?
That was going to be my next question. Yeah. Is there a sort of golden window? Because I know most cyclists, try doing running, they're swimming, some of them are triathletes, tennis, basketball, you name it, they're athletics individuals. And then they usually, as you said, get to crunch time, year 10 to 12, they've got to give something up. Yeah. Is there a golden window for that? Or is it just a matter of you just have to normally an external factor influences making that choice?
So, probably a bit of both. There's no sort of solid evidence yet that says that, this is sort of, the perfect window. Our general rule of thumb would be it's, sort of between 6 and 8 years out from your pinnacle event. So again, I work in the Olympic and Paralympic space. So, athletes that are getting ready for LA and Brisbane, they're probably specialized. That's about the right time to be specialized. But if they're aiming for 2036, really, they should still be doing some other activities. There's a lot of other factors that play into it. Just what is your lifestyle like? Are you still at school or not? How supportive is your family? What kind of financial status is the family? Like, can you actually afford to do multiple activities and multiple sports? So sometimes there are factors that, an athlete and their family can't control that sort of force their hand to specialize a bit earlier. But yeah, really our general rule, and again, what most of the evidence would suggest at the moment, is that we don't know when the right time is, but we do know that specializing early and sort of, 10 years, 15, even 20 years before your pinnacle event, that's where we start to see some of those negative effects of specialization coming in.
Yeah, because I feel like that conversation sort of comes around every so often, right? The whole generalist versus specialist, and we follow this path, and then some new research comes out and suggests that we're doing it incorrectly. It's quite a journey, I think, what you're describing there for athletes, like having to, and, we talk about this a lot with the athletes that we work with, that as a development team, Meridian Bikebug sits smack bang in the middle. So, we're not at the very start of their journey. We're certainly not at the end of their journey if it all goes well for those athletes. So, yeah, in your experience in working with different sports, have you seen it done well where I guess either teams or sports have been able to keep those athletes on track, as opposed to sometimes perhaps almost on the flip side when it hasn't worked out and you've had a really talented individual, but they've just haven't quite made it to where we potentially originally hoped because of X, Y, and Z?
Yeah. To your question around your athletes that maybe haven't quite made it, I think we all know an athlete like that, or several athletes. We all know that, the one kid at school that was, really good at everything, or maybe absolutely fantastic at a particular sport or discipline. We all know that one person from university. There's always that athlete who could have made it, but didn't for whatever reason. So something that we talk a lot about in our space is this idea of opportunities and choices, but not guarantees. And so that's something that we really try to work into, our coaches and sort of all elements of our programs, is that we are trying to provide opportunities for athletes. Then the athlete has a choice as to what they're going to do with that opportunity. They're going to, take education and, grab it with both hands and go and implement it as soon as they can. They're going to, listen to all the bits of advice they get. They're going to attend every training session that they get offered and things like that. They have the choice as to what they're doing with this opportunity that they've been offered. But even if they make all of the right choices, there's still no guarantee that things are going to work out the way that we think they are. There's no guarantee that things will still happen the way that they probably should. And that's because of probably the biggest element that influences in talent ID and development, which is chance. There are so many chance factors out there, everything from, which parents you chose to be born to, all the way through to, a car accident. If I'm thinking cycling, that kind of stuff happens, and that can completely, derail a career through no fault of the athlete or anything. It's just a chance factor. So we can't always control for those, but what we can do is, again, give athletes those opportunities to make the best possible choices to give themselves that best chance of beating those other chance factors and standing on the podium in whatever time frame it is.
Place a lot of pressure on ourselves to make sure everything is within control. That's obviously really sound advice. Have you worked with athletes? Yeah, what's your advice, I guess, for them to not lose sight of the bigger picture in their journey?
I mean, it's probably exactly that. Like, don't lose sight of the big picture. Like, what is it that you're actually aiming for? And for most of these athletes, it's probably not going to be to win this race today. It is to gain this piece of experience, so that in 2, 3, 5 years, I can come back and be ready to win when it counts. As we know as athletes and as coaches, that we can't expect athletes to perform at 100% of the time. We can't expect 100% performance out of athletes at every single competition they're at. We can expect 100% effort, but we can't expect 100% results at every single competition. So we just need to make sure that those athletes, something that, I always do with athletes when I'm working with them is, again, what are our controllable goals? We can't control what everyone else does out on the track. We can't control what the weather is like. We can't control the cobblestones. But what we can control is the 3 things that I've been working on in training in the last 3 months that I now need to execute. I can control the distance of my bike to somebody else's as I come into a corner. I can control whether I choose to take the more slippery side of a corner or, taking the wider but safer path. What is my goal for this race? Is it to stay upright? Is it to practice taking some risks? Is it to, practice riding at a certain point in the pack? Thinking about those. And then when we're reflecting on the race, it's not about your time or your position or any of those things. It's, did you achieve those 3 things that we set out to do? And if we did, great tick, and we move on to the next one. So sometimes those competitions are going to be about results and times and things because we need to qualify, or, it's our benchmark event, it's the end of the season, it's whatever it is. But if we go into every race thinking that if I don't podium, then it was a waste of time, then you're going to get disheartened real quick. And that just doesn't work for athletes doing it in that way. So that's probably, the biggest piece of advice I have for people is pick your battles. What are the important things I'm going to focus on today? What are my controllables? And how can I build on those race by race by race?
Yeah, it's easier said than done, right? Like, you always think, yep, I'm just going to keep everything in perspective and everything's going to be fine.
Very easy for me to say sitting here.
Yes, both of us, very easy, yeah. Have you ever had to deal with athletes who, you talked about selection, which, at the end of the day, like you said, selection is different in every sport. And in cycling, most of the time it's to do with results, but there are these almost coach's eye factors that sometimes come into play. Yeah, have you ever had to work with athletes where I guess they haven't been selected, and have you had to navigate that space in terms of supporting them, or perhaps you've seen it done well in your experience in your role?
Yeah, so it's definitely something. Every time we select an athlete, we are inherently deselecting an athlete, right? And so again, just from a coaching perspective, I think that's something that sometimes coaches don't quite realize that. Every time I'm having a selection meeting, it is just as much about who is not on that list as well as who is on that list. And even if it's somebody that was never on there to start with, so it often doesn't feel as active when we're not selecting somebody as opposed to deselecting them. But inherently, every time we pick athletes for a team, a squad, a competition, we are not selecting or deselecting other athletes. So the people that I've seen do that really well are the ones that actually take the time to talk to those athletes beforehand. The ones who have been deselected or not selected, rather than them getting an email or, seeing a post online or something like that saying, here's the people who are in. those athletes have been contacted ahead of time and they've been told, basically, sorry, not this time, but they've been given some feedback on that. Obviously, that'll depend on, context and how many athletes we're talking and things like that, but that they're actually getting that communication ahead of time and it's not kind of a public event that this person hasn't been selected. And also when they're being given feedback, like you said, there's sometimes elements of, a coach's eye or something like that. When I see this done really well, it's when there is a really clear selection policy that's been outlined by the organization, but that selection policy has a very clear piece in it for essentially coaches' call selections that does have that element of subjectivity. So we're taking 10 athletes on this team, 8 of them are going to be picked based on time or performance or whatever in a given, competition or time period or whatever. But the remaining 2 slots are at, the coaching team's discretion. And these spots will be determined by a combination of physical factors, coach's eye, attitude, pick your list of factors that go in there. But that then allows for sort of that element of coach's eye, of, coach subjectivity that we really need to make selections worthwhile. We're making predictions for, again, what's happening in the future, not now. So we have to have room for those athletes that maybe aren't performing yet, but a coach has seen something in them and they've got that opportunity. So if we've got something that allows those athletes to still stay in the team and stay in training, then that, to me, feels like the closest we're ever going to get to, best of both worlds. Talent development is not about just, letting everybody in and allowing everybody to be part of it. It's, I'm not advocating for, I guess, the democratization of sport in that sense. I think everybody should be able to play the sport, but yeah, elite sport exists for a reason. We need to have people that are achieving high levels, but we need to be open to the opportunity that some of them are going to come through those different pathways. And how do we allow them to reach that potential in a new sport?
I think that's probably a really nice place to end that. That's, couldn't have said it better myself, Alex. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, okay, we're about to start. Oh, come on, a helmet?
What, am I not good enough for you?
Oh, I mean...
Wout Van Aert wears me.
Yeah, fair, I'm sorry.
I get it, it's fine.
It's just when you get asked to do this, you think, talk to Alyssa Pilates.
Yeah, whatever. You ever had a crash?
Well, yeah.
Hit your head?
Yeah.
You can tell. You dumb.
Hey.
Hope you treated your helmet better than this.
Look, you're right. I'm sorry.
I'm just here, keeping the team safe.
Yeah.
They tell me to do this and I do, because I'm a nice guy.
Oh, man.
You think I don't have better things to do?
Well, I mean...
What?
Do you?
We all got very G'd up before this. This is probably my favourite, personally, on the current.
Yeah, it's always it's not necessarily always the most exciting race, but everyone always looks forward to it because it is the race most known.
Yeah, I think it was fellow Victorian.
Oh, it is only the only Victorian race in Pro Velo, actually. So, yeah, a bit of home ground advantage.
And there's just so much history with it.
Yeah. There was an early break, kind of just rolled off the front.
Yeah.
I don't really even remember when it went, but it went and no one was really concerned about it. It was kind of nice to have something up the road that was equal, I guess, with how the main competition of the day were all on equal footing around there. There was a bit of...
Coming into this race, we had our own goal of putting it in the gutter, starting Eshies, and we did really well with that. We are now skipping to the crash that happened. But I mean, before that, we were quite aggressive.
Yeah.
Butterfields put it in the gutter, brought back the carrots for the race. And then, I launched an attack off it. And that kind of started the split. That was the winning break. And then, I brought...
Riders in it?
Yeah. It's about 10 riders, had Armley with me there, which was cool. And I looked at the composition of riders and saw that there was a lot of sprinters with me, so I didn't want to bring them to the line fresh.
Yeah. So, if you look back on the race now, would you say you think you attacked too much, or that's what you had to do?
Well, no one else was really going to make it hard.
Yeah.
And
Butterfield's had there too.
Yeah, they wanted those two riders
Sprint.
up there.
Yeah.
Those were the two options.
I guess it did semi-work in the end because
Yeah.
not everyone was fresh
No.
for the sprint.
Yeah, I think, yeah, if I didn't do what I did, it would have been a pretty boring race to line
Yeah.
and just a little bunch of kicks. I'm happy with what I did. There's no regrets. Yeah, I mean, coming into that final corner, I cramped really hard, like my left calf. Yeah, kind of looked to Armley. I'm like, oh, do you have a sprint left? Because I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to finish it off. And yeah, I guess I still held on to finish it off for the podium.
It looked like a long sprint.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, I know how to do that sprint, but yeah, things happen. We learn from those.
A few
lessons.
years since you last did it. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, 4 years ago it was the first women's only Warnie, and it was a really special race to be a part of, and to revisit that 4 years later, completely different style of racing. And
Interesting this year?
yeah, it's so much more interesting. Yeah, I think Warnie is relentless of people going early, and you always see your non-sprinters try to launch it a few Ks before or coming into that final
corner.
I think the only exception was maybe Jensen Plowright. He is a renowned sprinter. He launched it from like the bottom corner and won it solo. But yeah, I mean, to read that sprint, it's kind of like a downhill drag and then it kicks up again. But the finish line is like in the distance, you're like, oh, it's so close. Like, it's right
not.
there. It's really not. Yeah.
The barriers also start, 300 metres before, or 250 metres before the finish. So that gives that illusion as well.
For sure. And yeah, it's definitely a race where people that should have won have lost because they've gone too early. And yeah, I mean, Sophie Edwards, she read it like textbook again, so got the second dove. And yeah,
she
kudos to
knows
her.
it well.